maybe we'll go ahead and kick this off, if you don't mind. So we want to welcome everybody to today's conversation. The topic is from active duty to civilian life, building a culture of success. Covers a lot of ground, so we're going to circle back on that in just a second. I'm Steve Amos. I head up the nonprofit HealthCode. Our mission is to empower people to live healthier, which are happier lives, free from preventable diseases. And actually, that ties in perfect with today's conversation. And we're so glad that all of you are here. And please feel like this is a conversation. You'll see at the bottom, though you're all muted, there's the chat. Pop those questions in the chat because we want to gear off of what's important to you, who's out here, part of the community listening. Also, you're going to be in the prize drawing. We're going to circle back on that because we are excited today about talking about veterans in the workplace, a healthy lifestyle that's really key for productive but a purpose-driven life, but a culture for your organization. And there's so much more. So use that chat box. Let us know what's important to you. And during the flow of the conversation, the next hour, we're going to pull those up and feel like we're all sitting at one big virtual table, right? The way we're going to drop this, the flow, is that I'm going to introduce our two amazing guests. They're each going to have about 8 minutes to kind of give their background on why these topics are important for them. And then we're going to have a fantastic ongoing discussion. And again, be sure to include your comments on this. I'd like to introduce Tony Cucolo. Tony is a retired U.S. Army Major General. And upon graduating from West Point, Tony's career, it took him around the globe: Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq. And rising in rank, Tony commanded over 20,000 soldiers with the 3rd Infantry Division. He was the president of the U.S. Army War College and much, much more. And a side note, both Tony and Gwyn said, Steve, just hit the high notes because otherwise we'd be here all day. Their accomplishments are that deep and amazing. Upon transitioning from the military, Tony for 4 years was with an associate vice chancellor for the University of Texas Systems. Tony, I think you have a real knack there for education, which is fantastic. And the executive director and co-founder for the National Security Innovation Council. And he serves on several nonprofit boards. Tony is now the CEO of a nonprofit, PCSI. It's the Professional Contracting Services Incorporated. They do amazing work. They're working with employing disabled veterans and others with disabilities, supporting services from hospitals and private sectors across the U.S. Your company should check them out. That's PCSI. So, Tony, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us and looking forward to your amazing insights.
Great.
Gwyn Armfield is a retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General. And upon graduating from the Citadel and being part of the Air Force after 9/11, just about 6 weeks later, Gwyn was on the Joint Operations Task Force, taking off from the Kitty Hawk for the October 19th, 2001 raid into Afghanistan. As a side note, Gwyn has been huge in participating with HealthCode in our program starting in 2016. And now we've been working with military organizations around the globe, including, some of you may have noted, our past event this past May called Battle of the Branches. And we're going to be pulling out one of these bad boys as part of the prizes. So put down some great questions. Gwyn rose to the rank of Deputy Commanding General for all the U.S. Coalition Special Ops in Afghanistan. And we're just so fortunate to have you, Gwyn, on the call. You know that now, upon Gwyn's retirement, he's taking all this amazing experience in leadership, working with small and huge groups globally with his consulting company, RGA Consulting Group. They work with corporations, they work with individuals, nonprofits, and developing leaders. Never do we need it more. And a big plug, for your summer reading, what needs to be on your list is Lead to Serve and Serve to Lead Leading Well in Turbulent Times. He co-wrote this with a retired Air Force Lieutenant General, Bruce Lister. I highly recommend this book. I have been around this game for a long time, and a lot of leadership books, but this one, you can tell it's embedded in actions that matter. So it's put it on your summer list. Oh, and that's and also write some great questions down, because we're going to be pulling from the Q&A a winner of one of those books. So keep your heads up for that. Gwyn, if you don't mind kicking this off, today is June the 6th. Huge event happened in 1944. And maybe that's a great bridge into the conversation of what's happening today. And it's actually more current and real than maybe many people realize.
Steve, thanks for having us. I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better as we prepared for this, and getting to know Tony and his wealth of experience. And so I'll start it off, and then he can follow on after me. But like you said, we're really excited about interacting via the chat here with the folks listening. We want to add value to your hour with us today. It's a unique day, and Steve, I know you picked this intentionally to be June the 6th. I believe we're 78 years since 160,000 Americans and Canadians and British and others crossed the beach at Utah and Omaha and Juneau and many others, Juneau Sword and all the other beaches that were hit on this day. General Eisenhower, later President Eisenhower, I think his mission, and Tony can correct me on this, but the mission he was given was very simple, because simple things are very hard. It was enter the continent of Europe and destroy the German army. Period. That was the guidance he was given. And all these people put this thing together that we still go back on and admire. The average age was in the early 20s. If you go back and look at the average ages, many of the 160,000 folks that went across the beach were late in their teenage years, with enormous responsibility, not only for themselves, but for those they were leading. You look back in the World War II timeframe, and you had leaders of large combat organizations that were 24, 26, 28 years old. And I think one of the things today we're going to touch on is just, the excellence that young folks can achieve if set up correctly with the right expectations and the right resources. They'll do tremendous things. And I'm just super excited about the young generation now. I have a chance to still work with them. Tony and I watched various generations grow up with us in the military, where we expect a lot and put a lot of responsibility on folks at a very young age. And it's just exciting to see that continue. We're obviously a little biased toward our experiences in uniform, but the thing I miss now that I'm out of uniform is working with just such great people, great Americans and great coalition partners that were, really in their 20s and just doing amazing things in some hard places. We're going to touch on fitness, I think, today a little bit. And, the theme that I think both Tony and I would share with you is that our purpose in life is what gets us up in the morning and gets us to do the things that make a difference in people's lives. If that's a measure of a success you use, is how much positive influence do you have on others? That's what I like to use. There's other metrics out there, but if you can, it's subjective, but that's the thing I focus on. But to do that, I've got to take care of myself physically and doing the physical, getting up in the morning and working out. I try to do an hour every morning. I've got 2 days a week. I've got folks that come over and work out with me, and we have a great time together. We push each other harder than we would individually. But the rest of the time, sometimes my wife and I'll go for a run, but every morning I start off by working out. And to me, not only does that establish a physical base, but it sets my mind up to get things done. That's my time to ramp up in the morning to be ready to take on the day. And the psychological piece of that is huge. And I think we can talk resilience later, but it adds this idea of
by the way, Gwyn, that reminds me, it's a way of making your bed.
Yeah, as our friend Admiral Bill McRaven wrote in his great YouTube video and book, Make Your Bed, he gets at this point. And he speaks a lot about resilience in there, and we can talk about that too. But this idea of, hey, I'm taking care of myself physically, that enables my psychological health. I'm interacting with people, and then I'm ready to take on the day. So I'm excited about talking about that, and I'll just end with this, that I know a lot of people that I've served with in and out of combat who are alive today because they were physically strong before an incident happened in their life, whether it was a stressful psychological event or it was a physical event like a car wreck or something else. Because they had prepared their mind and body, they were able to work through what I'll call your personal D-days, because we don't know when we're going to have to cross the beach. But for many of us, that's going to happen. And we've got to be prepared, I would say, physically, psychologically, and spiritually to do that. So I'm excited about today's conversation, Steve. Thanks for having me. And I'm honored to serve with Tony on your panel today.
By the way, Gwyn, can you repeat that line? Because that aspect of your personal D-Day, and you never know when you have to cross the beach, is actually really huge, because things happen.
Life happens, man.
They happen. We're not ready for them to happen. So that preparation is what it's about. Yes. Especially now, I think we'll come back to it more, Tony. But
right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, thanks, Steve and Gwyn and everybody. Thank you for being here with us today. And I'll tell you what, I asked Gwyn to lead on this because, you know, and this is no kidding, everybody. I'm a closet historian, and I love military history, and I consume biographies. And by the way, biographies are a great leadership tool. You get Gwyn's book and read biographies would be the best leadership advice I could give you. But I was last night I was sitting in my kitchen and I looked up at the clock, and it was 5:45 p.m. And I thought to myself that 78 years ago, at that moment over Europe, you know, Europe is 7 hours ahead of us. There were young Americans, Canadians, British, French, packed into aircraft, flying over a darkened channel to drop into a dark night, to dark landing zones, which unfortunately for the greatest, for a sizable number were unknown, unplanned. But I wanted Gwyn to lead because Gwyn, being an incredibly accomplished, decorated special operator and combat controller, I mean, his profession in the Air Force was preceded by the Pathfinders that jumped into France first on D-Day. And when I thought about that last night, I am still in awe of what those people did. I'm just, it's incredible. Anyway, and by the way, you know, Gwyn talked about late teens. Yeah, that's a fact. Tens and thousands of late teens going across, but your personal D-Day can come at any moment, at any age. Standing on the beach among the first waves was, I can name two famous brigadier generals for you. One was Norm Cota. He was a deputy commanding general of one of the divisions, and he's famous for saying, he's almost famous for being misquoted, but he's famous for saying, gentlemen, I mean, he's yelling over the din of gunfire, and he says, gentlemen, we are getting killed on the beach. Let's go inland and get killed there. And I mean, it's a little dark soldier humor, but he moved his soldiers inland past the German defenses there. And the other gentleman who was on the beach and by the way, Cota was 51 years old. So he's 51 standing there at Omaha Beach. And just down the beach from him was the son of Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who was 57 years old. And so maintaining your level of fitness, you don't know when your fitness will be the difference between life and death. But in a more appropriate for what we're talking about right now, fitness is your foundation, your base for well-being in so many different ways. And what I would like to do, my contribution today is since my transition in 2014, I've been in the leadership development space, but I've also been in the veterans advocacy space. And I'm currently working to assist veterans with disabilities. And so veterans transitioning, helping corporations, companies, large and small, corporate cultures understand what they get when they get a veteran. And those are the kinds of things I'd like to talk about. And we talked about a wonderful gentleman, Bill McCraven. That's what brought me to the University of Texas system. He became chancellor in January 15, called me up and said, hey, I could use you. And I dropped everything and went to work for Bill McCraven in Austin without hesitation. So there's a lot to that, make your bed. And I tell you what, I'd like to, the most important thing is discussion and taking questions. So I'm going to pause right there, Steve, and hand it back to you.
Well, thank you, Tony. I'd like to rip the moment off the aspect of the veterans and coming into the workplace. And I know, Gwyn, you've seen it as well. In fact, I had a conversation just a few moments ago, actually here at our home office, where a fellow who's working with one of his partners is a disabled veteran. And one of the things that I've heard from some of the veterans in large companies is the feeling that they are not being utilized. The fact that they had a great sense of purpose in the military. They had a lot of responsibility. And then that sometimes we get in a big company and that sense of purpose is maybe not as clear. The area of responsibility is something they had a long time before. I was wondering if you could speak on that. Am I correct in my observations, or am I off on that?
Tony, you want me to go first, and then you can
Yeah, sure thing. You bet.
follow up. I think for a lot of veterans, and I've been out for 5 years now, almost 5 years. And I was on the phone with a guy yesterday afternoon, called me up. And we had served together in Afghanistan. He's in another service, Marine officer, and finishing up 30 years of great service. And he was asking for some transition advice. And, you know, what it usually comes down to with veterans, it's not a conversation about compensation. That's secondary. It's not about the money. It's never been about the money for us. Although we want to be fairly compensated and don't want to be taken advantage of and, you know, paid according to what you produce, but it's about purpose. You know, they want to make a difference. They want to be in a job where they can wake up in the morning and know they can make a difference. And I think for the veterans who get out and you kind of, you know, you'll usually have maybe a couple different jobs before you find the one that fits really well for you. But it's all about, hey, can I make a difference in this organization? And you could be getting paid wonderfully well and not have much pressure on you and all, you know, everything's great, but you know, you're just not moving the needle for anybody. And I think that's whatever rank it was, or either you retired after 20 years or you separated after 4. You know, this idea of, I think for most veterans, not all of them, but for most of them, they felt like they made a difference every day. A lot of that is because for most of them, they were leading or directing some level of organization. If it was Tony's case, it was 20,000 plus soldiers. For others, it may be 15 or 20, you know, a mix of civilians and soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, or wherever they were in. But those people looked to them as their leader. And that's what's sometimes missing, I think, in the civilian world, is that the folks that are in charge of the organization, when people come into it, have not taken the time to set high expectations and then equip them with what they need to then go forward and make a difference for them. There's clearly a transition pathway from what they were doing in the military to what needs to be done in the organization in which they're now serving. But hey, enable that transition. But no, that person's there to make a difference. They wake up in the morning, they put whatever it is they put on, they come to work, whether it's in front of a computer in their living room, or it's in the office or in a factory or wherever, and they want to make a difference for you. But it's the leader's job of that organization to set conditions for them to do it. Tony, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, I know we got a question. Let me riff off of Gwyn, and then we can hit the question if you want. Look, I'm just going to reinforce what Gwyn said. I think I'm going to speak to two groups of folks here. If you're a veteran listening, I'm going to speak to you. If you are trying to establish a winning, successful culture in an organization and just don't happen to be a veteran, I'm speaking to you too. So listen, veterans, Gwyn and I have seen this over and over and over again. Some of the challenges veterans have when they transition are they've spent a life, no matter how short or long that was, a life in uniform where the job was the identity. Job being soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, Guardian. Job was the identity. So they sometimes jump too soon because they think they've got to have a job that is an identity. And so that is one mistake that veterans make. I cannot speak, I cannot repeat as strongly what Gwyn said about sense of purpose. Finding it is the challenge. And I've got a thought for you on that. You know what else is a problem for veterans, gang? And let me speak to the corporate folks out there. Self-promotion. Bragging is a character flaw. And so when a veteran arrives in an organization, they are not going to self-promote. They're not going to tell you what they did. And if they do, they might speak in a language you don't understand, which is now the veteran's responsibility to fix that. But this I have found so often veterans not sharing their capabilities because self-promotion is an issue. And the other thing that hamstrings veterans to a degree is they're not aware that multiple landings are allowed. You can try something, okay, it didn't work. You're gonna cycle through your sense of purpose and figure out what you value. And so if I could real quick, I mean, Gwyn and I talked about this with Steve. It's like, we want to tell you a lot of what, but we also want to give you some how in this thing. And I just wrote down some thoughts about if you're a veteran, listen, check your identity, see what it is. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, oh, what do I call you? I need to call you General. And I said, no, you do not. You call me Tony. General's what I was. Yeah,
me.
okay.
I was expected to call you sir.
It was more than you, buddy. Gwyn and I get that all the time. I mean, it's not all the time, but in some circles. Look, but it's General's what I was, I guess. But that was because of great soldiers and NCOs. General's what I was. Soldier, I'll level with you. Soldier is what I am. Soldier for life is what I am, and I'm not gonna change that. But check your identity, and it's really a worthy effort to sit and cycle through, think quietly about what's most important to you. What do you value the most? I mean, write that stuff down. Think about it, and then write. And I coach my guys to do this, even in my company. I'm at my company right now. I tell my senior vice presidents, I want to see your definition of success. Write a definition of success that has nothing to do with a job title, nothing to do with a salary. I mean, if somebody said my definition of success is to be a general and then a senator, well, okay, well, what if you don't make general and what if you're not elected? Are you a failure? Of course not. And it would be a mistake to attach yourself to those kinds of things. So writing a definition of success that is attached to your values, and then look for work that feeds that, or find other work if you're in a job that is not feeding that, because you won't be happy. And don't be afraid to reinvent. Do not be afraid to reinvent. Just because you are a great operations person doesn't mean you have to work in operations now. Go to those values, like I said, and find outlets during the transition period, like physical fitness. Find outlets to keep your head right as the frustrations that are inevitable move along the way. And then for my corporation folks, my thoughts, and Gwyn, I don't know if you want to pile onto this, but some tips: separate onboarding. Onboard your veterans separately. I mean, include them in the entire population, but I would offer to you, have a conscious second onboarding for veterans, so they meet peers, they learn the language of the company, they learn the ways of the company before they step into the job. It's very, very powerful if you can do that. Ensure that you establish a peer-to-peer opportunity. because nobody knows us like our peers. Beware of the veteran term being homogenous. I mean, Vietnam veterans are different from Cold War veterans, who are different from post 9/11 veterans. Women veterans are different than men veterans. I mean, just be careful of painting a broad brush for all your veterans. But if you allow peer-to-peer all veterans, that'll work itself out. And vets will thrive. And this goes back to, I'll close with this. Vets will thrive if they have a sense of identity, belonging, and a sense of purpose. And I would offer to you, that's key to your corporate culture. It doesn't matter if you're in the military or not. I mean, I want to belong to an organization. I want PCSI to have its own identity. I want my people to have a sense of belonging, that they are part of something larger than themselves, and they understand our why. And if you work on the mission, vision, and values of your organization, and you get buy-in, you can very quickly move towards the identity, belonging, purpose. All right, so I probably talked too long on that, Steve. I'm sorry.
No, those are so solid and so practical, Tony. And the reality is, and Gwyn, and we're going to jump to some amazing questions that have popped up. Thanks so much for doing that. I think I'm going to have to give away, Gwyn, a lot of shirts, but that's perfect. I think of you have a daughter, you have two sons, and this whole generation right now, what we're seeing is companies are struggling. How am I able to hire and retain great great employees? And a lot of it, they want to know, well, what's the purpose of that organization? How are we making a positive difference? And what's amazing, I think, with the veteran community is they already bring this aspect of, I'm used to delivering a purpose. I'm used to delivering value. And so organizations, as you're doing things to support their veterans, my gosh, it's going to enhance, I think, their overall organization to be much more effective in bringing that culture that they want to for where people want to join and to succeed.
Hey, Steve, can we jump on a question here?
Please go for it.
Great. I totally agree with Tony's comments there. That was perfect. Hey, I've been looking at the first question we got was this idea of how important are veterans' roles in public health policies. And I am not the expert on that, but my initial thought here, then you and Tony, maybe Steve can comment in detail on this, but the veteran role in public health is that I think within the military, in most cases, you're exposed to an incredibly diverse set of people because everyone's from everywhere else. It's this huge mixing bowl of people who join the military for a number of different reasons. You've got active duty, you've got Guard and Reserve, you've got civilians, and then you got their family members. And so you go, I'm dealing with this like super healthy group of people that all had to make it through basic training. And well, yeah, in some cases you do, but you also have to deal with their families and their kids and their health issues. And being able to take, as a commander, I am responsible for all of that. I'm responsible for the families, I'm responsible for the kids, I'm responsible for the service member and making sure they're getting the care they needed. So frankly, the service member is focused on the mission because if they're focused on taking care of family and stuff. So you see all kind of society and it's great. And frankly, I miss that now that I'm out, is that, rarely are you stationed near home. Everyone's from everywhere else in the country and many of them are from other places outside the country. And I think that perspective of diversity in terms of public health gives you an appreciation that other people who haven't had that exposure may lack. So I know that's probably not a public health policy response, but that's my initial reaction to it.
Yeah, I'll pile on there. There's and Tamiko, great question. I think veterans can play a huge role if they're willing to step in. Now, well, I'll save that for the end. Why? Other than professional athletics, okay, and first responders, the physical fitness, not just physical fitness, but health, holistic health is a job requirement in the military. And we probably don't talk about it enough. All the services have done a great job within the last 15 years on moving towards, sleep, nutrition, and behavioral health issues and those sorts of things. We've learned a lot since the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan on the cost of continuous combat, and how we treat that can actually make the force at large much healthier and more ready. But so you have these individuals where that is a part of them, but also, and I'm reinforcing what Gwyn said, you have these individuals who, and bear with me, I mean, I know maybe some folks might be, I'm about to say something and you might be tied to that media story or a negative moment, but I'm telling you, in the military, another part of the job requirement is inclusive language, inclusive operational planning. Anyone who has tried to operate in peacetime knows how they have to involve not just their soldiers, but their soldiers' families, the contractors, the Department of the Services Department of Civilians. And so they come with reflexive inclusion in approaches to problem solving. And I think that is, and the other thing, another thing that is reflexive to them is geography, history, and culture matter. And when you're approaching public health, geography, history, and culture matter. And so I think there is an untapped resource in veterans stepping into the public health sector. And I smiled in the beginning because you're talking to a guy that just spent 4.5 years in public higher education. And I found, okay, this is anecdotal, I found in some circles, I was dismissed. I didn't have a PhD. I didn't grow up in the academy, that sort of thing. And I go, okay. So I had to, elbow my way in and prove value, which might lead into Nate Hines's question, but I'll pause there on Tamika's question.
Great answers. And there's so much more we could say about that.
Hey, Steve,
Tamika, thank you for that question.
Yeah,
When do you
that
have
was
another
great.
comment? Then we can.
No, I'm just excited about these questions that are coming in. I
Yeah,
actually got
you
one
wanna jump on
texted
it?
to me a minute ago that I need to bring up at some point that I thought was a great question. But this idea of that Nate writes about being in charge, like you show up and you want to be in charge because you've always been in charge. Like, do you know how many people I was in charge of before I showed up here? Like, no one cares. Like, hey man, you're getting hired to add value. And Tony's got the exact right terms. You have to add value. That's what you show up and you need to add value. Some of that is just taking the time to be quiet and listen and observe your surroundings and learn the cultural norms of the organization you're now in. And they're very different and they're very subtle sometimes. Whereas in the in the military, you got all this doodads on your uniform or your units or whatever. It's sometimes very clear, like where you stand in the hierarchy. And the civilian world's all first names, right? And so just taking the time to not enjoy the benefit of not being in charge. You're going to end up in charge eventually, trust me. Value that time, observe, orient yourself to what's going on, seek advice, do the job you're given, add value to that job. And once you do that, more will come to you. But don't feel like you need to be in charge on day one. And frankly, you're probably better off not being in charge on day one, because on day 200 or day 2000, when you are in charge, you now are really prepared to be successful. Because the private sector operating environment, what I call the for-profit environment, is very different than what we're used to. At the end of the day, though, the organizational aspects and the leadership aspects and the character aspects are very similar. And there's a couple of questions. A question here in a minute about, immoral activity and stuff like that. I can't wait to get to that one. But don't feel like you need to be in charge. I came home one day, I clearly remember this pulling in my garage about 2 years after I had gotten out. And throughout my career, I had sat at the head of the table, whether it was a team room of 18 people or whether it was at U.S. Central Command, helping the 4-star run the organization of about 85,000 people. You were at the head of the table. And I realized that I may never be at the head of the table again. And I came to the conclusion that I'm okay with that. It bothered me at first, but I'm really happy not having that weight of responsibility, because now I can offer outside clear perspective to the person who's sitting at the head of the table. Now, I enjoy doing that. I mean, I like being the decision maker, but there's a lot of benefit to not having to immediately go into that role that we're used to doing in the military. You show up, you're in charge, you're responsible for everything. But hey, as a veteran transitioning, hey man, embrace not being in charge for a little bit and just learn from that.
Yeah, and also listen, again, glancing off of what Gwyn said. Hey, teammates, veterans out there, remember the sine wave of humility we were all on? Let me describe that for you again. Okay, so like you're in a really good position, maybe in a unit, and then they send you to staff. And then you get to a really good position in a unit, and they send you to staff. I'll just give you one vignette. So I'm brigade combat team commander at Kelly Hill, Fort Benning. I got this wonderful brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division. We were on our own hill. I mean, literally, I could shut the gates of my little mini post and be the warrior king if I wanted to. I go from there to the Pentagon, and so here I am. I arrive at the Pentagon flush with the ego of a brigade commander, and I end up in a cubicle next to the toaster, the microwave, and the refrigerator. And so every day at 3 p.m., people would come and pop popcorn next to me, and I would smell like microwave popcorn until I left. Anyway, the humility part is, I mean, my entire career was you're the boss. You're not. Matter of fact, you sit there and listen. And so that happens in transition too. And I just relied on that as well. And it doesn't mean it came easy. Oh no, it doesn't mean it came easy. And I know you want to glance over to Julie's question there, Gwyn, because that's a good one. She's glancing off of what I said about the definition of success.
Yeah, let's talk about these are great. Go ahead, Gwyn.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve. You want me to just keep going?
Yeah. What you're going to say? Keep going.
I'm trying to digest Julie's question here.
Well, here, let me lead for you, Gwyn. Let me lead.
I know where you're headed, Tony, on this. I just don't know if I want to jump in with that term or not right away.
Okay, all right. So, it is hard, Julie. It's hard. There's no question about it. To not reach for or have a part of your self, your identity, I don't want to say self-worth, but what's my title? Because I just left a lifetime of meeting certain gates, going to school, getting experiential learning, getting evaluated, and then I go through the next gate, and then I do the same, and I go through the next gate, but I'm always moving up. Now, how do I deal with that? And I offer to you, it's hard. It's hard. If you work through, what do you truly value? Like that moment Gwyn had in his garage. If you work through what you truly value, you come to terms, you come to peace with that. And I'm not saying it's easy. So there I am at the University of Texas System, an associate vice chancellor. Does anybody know how low that is by any chance? Anyway, I'm an associate. It sounds good, doesn't it? But anyway, so I get Admiral McCraven. He said, "Hey, Tony, I missed you at the New Year's reception." And I said, "Hey, sir, I'm not on the A list. I'm not at the level that gets invited to your New Year's reception." He goes, "Well," another guy says, "Hey, what's your parking spot number?" I don't have a parking spot. Anyway, so, but you find solace, you find contentment, fulfillment's a better word, in the tasks you are doing. And they could have called me anything, but the fact I could get in front of faculty and students and try and guide them through the development of their leadership skills, that fired me up and was rewarding. So, Julie, that probably didn't help, but it's something you have to come to grips with for sure. Try that definition of success.
Tony, can I jump on and just kind of piggyback on that a little bit? Back to the idea of purpose, and you're talking about the title and the transition. The military is, like you talked about, you're whether you like it or not, or whether you think it's the case, your identity is very closely tied to your position, because it just kind of affects everything, and it changes every 18, 24 months, maybe every 6 or 12 months. And so when you leave that, it's a very dynamic world of constant change. People are every 2 years, leaders are changing out. You've only got 20 years or so to work with. And then you go to an organization that people don't change every 2 years. They may not change for 20 years. The boss may be the boss for 20 years in that mid-sized company. And change is threatening to people. Like, hey, I'm in this job. I've been in this job for 10 years, and this young lady comes in, all hair on fire, former Marine gunnery sergeant, ready to take over the world. Like, so there's that side of it from the employee or the employees who are there. But for the veteran, the thing I've found, and I don't know if other people found this too, but this sense of purpose that we have so closely tied to our service really doesn't exist in the private sector. Your job is probably not going to be so inclusive and consuming that 18 hours out of every day is focused on that job. Or, for some of us for 20, 30 years, that's how you live. But when you go into the private sector, for-profit, nonprofit, whatever it is, what I found at least is all those things that kind of added up to my purpose in life were disaggregated, but they were all still there. I found them in different places. I served in my church. I actually do sit at the head of a table for a small team at our church, and I learned how to lead volunteers. And that's a challenge because your mission as a leader of volunteers is just to get them to show up. If you can get people to consistently show up and volunteer their time, you have succeeded as a leader. Whether you accomplish a task is irrelevant. And I had to learn that because I was a task-driven person. But that was part of my fulfillment. Finding time to be focused on my family and prioritizing my family for the first time was a great piece of fulfillment for me. Like, you know what? I'm going to be at when I got out, I went to every single sports event my daughter had her senior year in high school. I did not miss one. And I rode home on the track bus from her last track meet because I missed everything up to that point. And that was fulfilling for me. No title, position, or check could have replaced that experience. So, there's all kind of ways to be involved. I have a chance to participate in the lives of at-risk high school age young men. And I sacrifice a fair amount of time during the week to go do that. I don't know if I'm moving the needle in their lives at all, but I'm trying. And so all these different things add up to, more than I was probably doing in uniform as a drill officer. And I have a chance to run my own consulting business. I enjoy that. I enjoy being my own boss in that. But I also wouldn't mind working for, a company where I'm making a difference. But it's this idea of you're not going to find fulfillment all in one place anymore. It's going to be in a lot of different places, and that's okay. And it's okay to have some time off, frankly, read a book, go do something fun. A lot of us that are so task driven can't accept that. That's just being lazy. But that's why you get up at 5 a.m. and work out. You got the rest of the day ahead of you to do all kind of stuff. So I found myself talking to more veterans about that concept of disaggregating your purpose.
And I think that's a fantastic response, actually, to several of the questions out there. I mean, Heather's and others of finding the sense of purpose, which is beyond our jobs, is actually our life's really should be. Tony, did you have something else you want to add to that? I think we now have.
Yeah, well, I was going to
have about 15 questions in about 15 minutes. So
yeah, I was going to do a quick nod to Heather. Involving. Okay, so you're running a company. You got veterans in the company. You want to give them a sense of purpose. Creating a mentoring and maybe find any words you want for that. Mentor, coach. Involving them in a specific program is fantastic. That lets us exercise our chops, things we're good at, dissecting problems, having coaching difficult conversations, things like that. Anyway, but Heather, here's my one bit of advice is if a company is going to establish a mentor program of any kind, coach whoever's going to mentor. There's got to be here's how to be a mentor. I don't want to call it training, coaching, because that's a special relationship. And then I would also offer that having the veteran be mentored by someone relatively senior in the company, establishing that one-on-one relationship speeds the transition and maybe will crush myths and misperceptions in both sides. You know, what this company is like, the veteran may have thoughts, and then the mentor will understand that there are myths and misperceptions about veterans in general. So anyway, mentoring veterans is a great way to bring them on board. If veterans are a part of your mentorship program, that's a great way to get them a sense of purpose. Just train, coach before you do that. Keep it well-defined.
Tony, you and I spoke previously about the difference we found in the private sector with HR and leadership versus in the military, where the commander, he or she, was responsible for kind of everything. And you had a personnel section that took care of admin, but the leader was responsible for everything about the people. And so with that, you got to know them. In our book, Bruce and I write about the importance of doing feedback. You know, sitting down eyeball to eyeball, even if it's over a computer, one-on-one, but taking the time to go, hey, let's just stop all the work for a second. Steve, how you doing, man? Like, you've been with the company for 6 months now. You know, how's the transition going? You know, remind me again about your family and how you found the company. You know, what do you like about being here and what would you improve? And I used to do the 3 up, 3 down. It was an Army thing. You know, what are 3 things, if you were king of the world, what are 3 things you would never change about being here? Like, you know, which I'd never change because you like it. And what, if you were king of the world tomorrow, what would you change at 8 o'clock in the morning? What are 3 things you change right now? And I wouldn't always act on that, but I'd look for the trends. And I actually used to have this drill, and I think it's in the book. When I first came into an organization, I would hand out 3x5 cards to everybody. Like, we'd have an all call. Everybody, you know, all the employees in the room. Hey, you know, I'm the new whatever, director or commander, whatever position I was in. Like, and this is my question to them: 3 up, 3 down. What are 3 things you would change right now? What are 3 things you would never change? Do not put your name on it. I don't know your handwriting. I just got here. Put it in the box in the back. The only person that's going to look at those is me. And I would look for trends. And there's some quick wins you can just do immediately. But I think the same philosophy applies to a veteran coming in your organization or anybody. It's just good leadership. And it's as the leader. And if the leader's not doing it, then the HR person ought to do it. But it's taking the time to one-on-one just for 5-10 minutes. Hey, how are you doing? How's your family? You know, what challenges you have going on? And the question that I had the privilege of working for a guy named Dr. Jim Roach, who was the Secretary of the Air Force. And I carried his bag around for 2 years, but he had previously been military. He had been a private sector leader, for profit. And he said, you know, the best question you can ask somebody is, how can I help you do your job better? Because it's not like, how can I make you a better person? Because I can't affect that, but I can certainly affect how to help you do your job better. And that doesn't put anybody off, you know. And I thought that was one of those, you know, as a leader, your job is to ask the great question, the perfect question. As a follower, you're trying to have the perfect answer, but as a leader, you're trying to have the perfect question. And I took that from the secretary and I used it. I still use it. You know, how can I help make you better at your job? Do you need training? Do you need equipment? And if you go talk to military people these days, it's like, hey, I need to get on my computer. It takes me 30 minutes to log on to my computer. And it's like, you hear that at all the services. I got 2 sons in the military, 2 different branches of the service, same thing. But those kind of questions that you ask as HR or as a leader, and then if you're the follower, you know, sometimes you got to manage up and you just go to them and say, hey, you know, you're paying me a lot of money. If you could fix these 2 things for me, I think it affects everybody. We'd be a lot more productive for you. You know, the leader probably just doesn't even know they asked that because they're busy, you know, focused on P&L or something. I don't know, but that face-to-face interaction, whether you're onboarding or doing feedback or doing performance reviews, annual performance reviews, it's all about just maintaining that personal relationship. I think that's the biggest thing.
Just I got a quick vignette. So Afghanistan, 10th Mountain Division, Lloyd Austin, our current Secretary of Defense, Commanding General, 10th Mountain Division. I was his deputy commander in Afghanistan. And obviously this is a while back. Anyway, when he wasn't flying around the battlefield and with his M4 visiting everything and getting into the mix, I'd be back at Bagram Air Base. Anyway, I'd have my hair on fire about something that probably in the great scheme of things was not critical, but to me at that moment, it was really important. And I would go find him and I'd go, sir, and I pour lighter fluid on my head and set it on fire, that kind of thing. And I go, do you get all active? And he would look at me and he would, if there was a chair nearby, he'd put out his huge hand and he'd just go like this. And that would make me sit down. And he looked at me, he goes, how you doing? And that just caused me to pause for a moment and answer him on how I'm doing. And then that kind of reframed the whole conversation. Anyway, we're lucky to have him as Secretary of Defense. He's a great guy. But, how are you doing? I mean, put aside the noise for a moment, establish that personal relationship, just reinforcing what Gwyn said.
Tony, part of that, how are you doing? There some fantastic questions, and I apologize for people not being able to see them. We're going to send them your way. There's a question about how you're doing. There is a whole system in the military how you can act when you see things that aren't going right, I think. And someone asked, what happens when you see some things maybe in the company that there are some issues? What happens now, Tony, when that you see that you would respond to those that the system maybe is not there, the process isn't there the way it was before?
Yeah, been there out of uniform, excuse me. And I'll tell you what, you have to be true to yourself and what's right and what's wrong. And I would offer to you that if you see something unethical, immoral, illegal, you throw the red flag, even if it costs you your job. You throw the red flag. Gang, I've just been through this too many times since I got out of uniform. The numbers are not large, but they're enough to really bother me that in different venues, everything from an assistant coach afraid to tell the coach when, that he's lying about something. In the academic world, a professor too scared to tell the provost about a dean who is sexually harassing someone. I've just seen too much of it, and that I'll give you a conversation. I'll give you a real conversation. I'm sitting there with my boss in the academic world. I'm sitting here with my immediate boss, not the Admiral Craven, and we're doing this investigation on something that went wrong in an area, and the question went this way. You knew that your boss, this individual's boss, you knew that your boss was cooking the books for 2 years, presenting inaccurate data to make your organization look good, and you did nothing about it. Why didn't you say anything? And the answer was, I didn't want to lose my job. To which I said, and now you have. You can't hide that stuff. You can't, and the most important person you can't hide it from is you. And you know what's right, you know what's wrong. You throw the red flag no matter what. You got to be careful of the graceful change inside. This is very situational. I would offer to you that it is illegal, immoral, unethical. You got to throw it. If it's just poor leadership, bad communication, then yes, you point it out to people. You have one-on-ones, you have difficult conversations with the source, and you try and get them to see the right way. But only be graceful if it's merely poor leadership or bad communication. Gwyn?
No, spot on. I think go to the source one-on-one and address it and go, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Is there more to the story? But I think you give that person a chance to respond to you. And then if that's not answering the question for you, or if it is what you suspect it might be, it is your duty to report that. And we stress that in the military, and we hold people accountable. Like when you do an investigation, the question is, who knew about this? And when you find out who knew about it, they're all held accountable. And when you go back and look at all this drama we've had in sports organizations and academic and military and private sector, there's a lot of people who knew, and culturally they felt they couldn't do anything about it. And all of them could have made a difference. And you're responding to the victim, but you're preventing, victims in the future. And it's your duty to do that. So, man, I mean, we could talk a whole hour about those things. I did have a question about, a leadership question from a close relative of mine who texted me about civilian managers who are specialists who then become, leaders, and they're not trained for it. What do they do? My answer to her is that she needs to buy my book and read it, because we addressed that in there. But I'll call my sister up later and debrief her on that. But I appreciate her writing the questions. But Steve, we're about out of time. I put my email, and I know Tony can do the same thing. I'll put my email out in the chat, and I think I sent it to everybody, but it's out there. If you have any future questions, please reach out directly to me or through Steve. And it's been an honor to be with Tony, with you, sir. Thanks for partnering with me on this. And Steve, thanks for asking me.
We have so many questions that we've not been able to touch on. I think we'll follow up by putting my email in, and Gwyn did too. So what we'll do is let everybody know. It's great to see someday. I want to give a shout out. I think Alexis is in there from, I hope you don't mind me saying HealthCode, HCSC, Healthcare Service Corp, mothership for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, Illinois, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Montana. It was really great, Gwyn, seeing them. Their veterans actually stepped up and said, we want to be connected. And so they utilized our platform. And during the Battle of the Branches, and one of the reasons was to connect their veterans and then raise awareness within their company. And that's fantastic. I see a great note about, I think it's important, the families. I think we're going to need, Tony, a whole other session, or maybe two. One, if it's okay, if people think this is important, please say something in the chat. Are there 14 new messages? Oh my gosh, where did the time go? I'd like to have one totally on resilience, totally on mental health that we're facing, because I do think that people in the military community have a deeper, robust sense of this that we can learn from, plus why we help them. Tony, do you have a couple words to say before I wrap this up? I wish it had another hour.
Yeah, well, hey, let's do this again. I'm Velcroed to Gwyn now. I'm not going anywhere without my special operator. He's got to jump in first for me. Listen, it's been enjoyable. You can tell that everyone that this is a passion for me and Gwyn. And we think HealthCode is a fantastic organization, and we'll support Steve, anything you want to do as we move forward in the future. That's it. Over to you, buddy.
Well, thank you, Tony. That means a lot. As again, HealthCode is a nonprofit. Our mission is to empower people with healthier lives. And that's a connected life. And that's realizing that you matter. And one of the things that for all of us, we need to retouch with ourselves, because if you don't feel like you have worth and purpose and that you're amazingly awesome, it's really hard to go forward. And so we need time to recharge ourselves, especially maybe find some time with someone to do that and to be in a place to reach out. So in the comments, there's so many wonderful resources out there, but how do we help connect that with people, and how do we build our organizations going forward? In the private sector, there's a wonderful group now, Conscious Capitalism, talking about all stakeholders, connecting with them. We're a nonprofit, healthcode.org. Check it out. Email us. We're going to provide follow up on all of the video that's there. And a quick thank you. I want to thank Tony, Pam, and your organization. I want to thank Pam Watson for her help in this. I want to thank Gwyn, your wife, Catherine, because she's always amazing in there. On my team, Stephanie Scott with Seismic Communications. I want to thank all the other military branches that maybe aren't getting a real shout out right now. Tony, my dad, was Navy Pacific World War II, and his brother was as well, but another brother was Army Air in Europe. And so to all the other branches and families and all of us that support, we just want to thank you for all you do. And thanks everyone for your time today. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve. See you. Bye
See you,
now.
Steve. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.